Picture this. You are 15 years old, your hair still cut in the style of a village child, and you're clutching a thin wool blanket as you step into the cold heart of Saint Euphrosyne's convent, somewhere in the north of France in the year 1377. The stone beneath your bare feet bites with each hesitant step. The air inside the chapel is thick with incense, sweet and choking, while your nose catches the underlying scent of damp stone and the distant, ever-present tang of old fear. Behind you, the heavy oak door groans closed, swallowing the echoes of your mother's last whispered prayer. Your world has vanished in a single clanging moment. You are now, they say, a bride of Christ. But as the door's lock slides home, you sense a presence behind you that is not divine. Your hands tremble. The silence of the convent is not holy. It's a trap that tightens with every breath. And tonight, for the first time, you realize you are completely, terrifyingly alone. You're told that this place is a refuge, a sanctuary from the world's dangers, that here, among sisters in Christ, your soul is safe and your virtue protected. But listen carefully. The walls themselves whisper a different story. What you don't know, what you're never meant to know, is that the convent is not a haven, but a cage built by powerful men for purposes that have nothing to do with faith. Outside, villagers cross themselves and nod in respect as they pass the convent gates, never suspecting that behind these walls, salvation comes at a monstrous price. The rituals that await you would make modern prison scandals look almost innocent. Everything you thought you knew about piety is about to be shattered, because here, in this shadowed warren of corridors and cells, the difference between prayer and punishment disappears. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. You're not here by your own will. You're not even here because of some special calling or a family tradition of devotion. You were sent, traded almost, because your father couldn't afford a dowry, because your elder brother needed your share of the inheritance, or because a whispered scandal in your village demanded a sacrifice to cleanse the family name. Historical records from convents across Europe tell the same story, century after century. Thousands of girls and young women forced behind cloistered walls as political pawns, economic burdens, or scapegoats for sins they never committed. In the records of Avignon, 1365, Bishop Jean d'Arcy stands accused by a group of nuns, women whose voices usually never left the convent, of systematic abuses that no one in the outside world could have imagined. But his trial, like most, vanished into silence, and his name was quietly restored to honor. You wonder how many more like him still hold the keys to these iron-bound doors. You clutch your blanket tighter, following the Mother Superior, her face carved with the hard lines of habitual suspicion. Her steps echo in the endless hallways. "Obedience is salvation," she intones, eyes sliding past you as if already measuring your capacity for submission. At dinner, you kneel on the cold stone, your knees aching, while the senior nuns recite prayers with voices as flat and distant as tombstones. They watch you, weighing every movement. Any slip, a glance, a cough, a breath out of turn will be noted. The rules are not merely strict. They are designed to break you down, to make you silent, invisible, and easily controlled. Think you know what convent life meant for medieval women? Think again. This is not the gentle retreat the poems and paintings promised. It's an institution designed to erase your identity, strip away your defenses, and make you utterly dependent on those who claim to save your soul. The Church praises its daughters as paragons of chastity, but beneath the hymns and ritual, there is a brutal hierarchy where the powerless are at the mercy of those with absolute authority. According to papal records from the early 1400s, it was common for local lords and bishops to visit their flocks unannounced, using their right of confession to interrogate, to intimidate, and, sometimes, to choose favorites for reasons that have nothing to do with spiritual guidance. You hear the stories quickly, whispered by trembling voices in the laundry room, behind the kitchen door, or in the brief privacy of the garden. A novice who refused to obey the visiting priest vanished overnight, her bed stripped before dawn. Another, punished for supposed impure thoughts, was sent to a cell beneath the chapel, emerging weeks later changed and silent. The official records call these disappearances penance. The girls call it something else, damnation. But here's what no one outside the convent understands. The greatest danger isn't the world you left behind. It's the keepers of your soul, the confessors, the bishops, the mother superiors who decide your fate with a word. And as you kneel in the candlelit dormitory that first night, listening to the creak of footsteps in the darkness, you realize the rituals you were taught to revere are only the beginning. Because when the doors are locked and the world forgets you, anything can happen. Tomorrow you will discover what it means to confess in a place where innocence is a liability, and silence is your only weapon. But tonight, you try not to cry, pressing your face into the scratchy blanket, hoping the nightmares that stalk these ancient stones will pass you by. You have no idea what price you'll pay for survival, or what you'll become just to endure. And what happens when the keepers of your soul become your tormentors? That's a secret the convent is determined to keep. You wake before dawn, stomach twisted with dread, the scent of mildew and candle wax thick in the air. The novice mistress moves through the dormitory, her keys jangling with every step, her voice hushed but sharp. Rise. Morning prayers. You shuffle with the other girls, bare feet scraping the flagstones, filing into the shadowed chapel. Outside, the world is still blue-black with night, but inside, the candles gutter as you kneel, the cold seeping through your bones. The prayers are chanted in Latin, syllables you barely understand, while your mind churns with questions you cannot ask. After prayers, breakfast, a thin broth, a crust of bread. The silence is absolute, enforced by the watchful eyes of the senior nuns. A single slip, a dropped spoon, a whispered word, earns you a sharp look, or worse, a note in the ledger. You learn quickly that silence here is survival, and secrets are currency. But today, the routine shatters. At midday, the bell tolls twice, unusual. The novice mistress appears, face unreadable. You. Come. She leads you down a narrow corridor lined with closed doors, each one a world of rumor and fear. Your heart beats against your ribs as you're ushered into a small, dark chamber. There, in the center, sits Father Michel, the visiting confessor. His robes are spotless, his eyes fixed on you in a way that feels both clinical and predatory. The door closes. The world narrows to the scrape of his chair, the scrape of your knees against the floor. Confession cleanses the soul, he says, voice gentle but cold. But honesty is essential. Nothing must be hidden from God's servant. You stare at the floor, repeating the phrases you've been taught, but his questions are not the ones you expect. He asks about your body, about thoughts, dreams, feelings you barely understand. Each answer seems to disappoint him or amuse him, or lead to even more specific, uncomfortable demands. Have you had impure dreams? Do you know the cause of temptation? The room seems to close in, the air growing thick and heavy. You sense that this is no ordinary confession. This is something else, something darker. You're not alone in your dread. Whispers among the novices confirm what you already fear. These confessions are systematic, regular, and always private. Punishments follow the slightest perceived sin. Extra prayers, harsh fasts, or silent isolation in the convent's coldest cellars. But here's where it gets worse. You soon realize that the confessional is a place not just of discipline, but of grooming. The line between penance and exploitation blurs until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Historical records from the convent of San Zaccaria in Venice, 1491, describe the secret penance sessions led by Father Tommaso. Testimonies preserved by visiting church officials recount girls interrogated for hours, forced to endure questions and punishments for impurity, accusations that could never be disproven, and which followed them for the rest of their lives. In many convents, these sessions were an open secret, enforced by senior nuns who wielded the threat of eternal damnation with chilling efficiency. But the horror doesn't end with the priests. The Mother Superior and senior nuns, women who should have protected the vulnerable, instead enforce the will of the visiting clergy. They watch for signs of resistance. An unsteady voice, a rebellious glance, a tear wiped too quickly away. Any sign of reluctance is noted, punished, and, if necessary, reported to higher authority. You learn to hide your feelings, to keep your gaze lowered, your voice steady. But even this is not always enough. One night, a young novice named Isabel disappears. Her bed remains untouched, her blanket folded neatly at the foot. The next morning, the other girls whisper, "She's under special penance." But no one says more. The lesson is clear. Question too much, resist too visibly, and you vanish. The threat is always there, hovering, a specter more terrifying than any punishment the outside world could imagine. You start to see the system for what it is. A hierarchy where the powerless are broken, one by one, until obedience is instinct. The fear becomes part of daily life, a constant, gnawing presence. Every interaction is shadowed by the possibility of being summoned, questioned, or marked for penance. The silence grows thicker, more suffocating. And still, the outside world believes you are safe. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes the worst wounds leave no mark at all. They are hidden beneath layers of obedience, silence, and shame. You witness the transformation of girls who arrived hopeful, bright-eyed and curious into silent, hollow shadows of themselves. Their laughter vanishes, their eyes grow dull, and you understand, with a sickening certainty, that survival here means surrendering more than your freedom. It means surrendering your voice, your dignity, your sense of self. You can't help but wonder how many others have passed through these gates before you, swallowed whole by the system, their stories lost to time and silence. Historical accounts suggest the numbers are staggering. Inquisition records from the late 15th century detail dozens of cases where complaints by nuns were suppressed, evidence destroyed, and witnesses threatened into compliance. The Church's power is absolute, and within these walls there is nowhere to run. Right now, you're feeling the weight of these revelations. You've witnessed the breaking of a young novice's will, her voice silenced, her fate sealed behind locked doors. If you need to keep uncovering the buried truths behind these sacred walls, hit subscribe now. There are secrets here that will change how you see history and yourself. But the horror is only beginning, because soon you'll see how the very laws and rituals meant to protect are twisted into tools of domination. And what happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about faith, power, and survival. You wake to the tolling of the morning bell, your eyes gritty from a night of restless dreams. All around you the dormitory is quiet. Too quiet. One bed remains empty. The others rise wordlessly, faces set and pale, avoiding your gaze. You swallow your fear and join the procession down the winding stone corridors, each footstep echoing through halls that feel less like a house of God and more like a labyrinth designed for forgetting. Breakfast passes in silence. The eldest nuns distribute bowls of thin gruel, their eyes flicking from face to face, searching for any hint of rebellion. Overhead, the rafters drip with condensation, and every sound, the scrape of a spoon, the shudder of a cough, seems amplified in the tense, watchful air. You learn to keep your head down. Even in a crowd, you are alone. But what you begin to realize, as the days wear on, is that the convent is its own ecosystem, a closed system where power accumulates in the hands of a select few. You notice how senior nuns enforce the rules with cold efficiency. Some wield their authority as if they enjoy it, while others seem brittle and haunted, as if they were once like you, hopeful, trusting, afraid, and have been remade by the place itself. The youngest are assigned the hardest tasks, the coldest beds, the most humiliating chores. Punishments are public, designed to humiliate and isolate. Hours kneeling on stone, days of bread and water, entire weeks of enforced silence. And above all of this, the knowledge that every word, every glance, every minor infraction will be reported and remembered. But here's where the system shows its true face. When visiting authorities arrive, the atmosphere shifts. The bishop's carriage rolls through the gates, wheels splashing mud across the courtyard. The nuns scurry to prepare, and you feel a collective shiver of dread pass through the convent. The bishop and his attendants sweep through the halls, inspecting the dormitories, the kitchens, the chapel. But their interest isn't in prayer or piety, it's in the girls themselves. You hear the whispered warnings: stay out of his way, don't meet his eyes, don't attract attention. You learn that a smile at the wrong time, a misplaced word, can bring consequences that last for years. Historical accounts make it clear. Convents across Europe, from Rouen to Naples, operated as personal domains for the men who controlled them. The 1427 investigation of the convent of Saint Denis in Paris exposed an entire network of nighttime visitors, bishops, priests, and powerful laymen whose presence was never questioned. The official records speak of unauthorized rituals, but the meaning is clear to anyone who can read between the lines. The girls who disappeared during these visits are never mentioned again. Their absence is explained as illness, transfer, or, worst of all, spiritual unfitness. Your daily life becomes a careful performance. You memorize the rules, never speak out of turn, never question a command, never look for help where none will come. Senior nuns teach you how to survive, sometimes with pity, sometimes with a hardness that frightens you. One, Sister Madeleine, whispers to you while scrubbing the chapel floors: obedience keeps you alive. Remember that. Even when the bishop comes, her eyes are hollow, her hands red and raw from years of penance. Punishments escalate when the bishop is in residence. Girls are summoned for private inspections, their names called aloud in the refectory. The chosen ones return hours later, eyes downcast, voices muted, sometimes limping. You watch this happen again and again, the list rotating, but always returning to the ones who can least defend themselves. The younger girls are especially vulnerable. You start to fear for those whose beauty attracts the wrong kind of attention, but the cruelty is systematic, not random. Punishment cells exist for a reason. Small, windowless rooms beneath the chapel, cold as crypts and always damp. You're forced to scrub these floors on hands and knees, the smell of mold and rot making you gag. The threat of being sent here is enough to keep most girls compliant. But some resist, at first. You hear their muffled sobs through the stone walls at night. In the morning, their silence is a warning. Sometimes medical examinations are ordered, justified as health checks or tests of purity. These are performed by priests or doctors appointed by the bishop, men whose authority is absolute. The nuns assist, holding you in place, reciting prayers, their faces stony with practiced indifference. You know, as you lie trembling on the examination table, that your body is not your own. You belong to the convent, to the church, to the men whose power is reinforced by centuries of law and doctrine. But here's where it gets even darker. Every attempt to speak out, to tell the truth about what's happening, is crushed beneath the weight of authority. In 1455, Sister Marguerite of Rouen tried to expose abuses in her convent. Her testimony, preserved in Inquisition records, describes secret visits, punishments for imagined sins, and the complicity of her superiors. She was declared mad, confined to her cell, and erased from the convent's history. Those who survive learn the lesson well. Obedience and silence are rewarded. Resistance is punished, forgotten, or destroyed. The fear doesn't fade. It settles into your bones, becoming part of how you move, how you think, how you breathe. You find yourself watching, always for the next summons, the next inspection, the next chance to disappear. Some of the girls begin to forget what life was like before the convent. Their memories of family, freedom, sunlight are replaced by the rhythm of bells, the chill of stone, the pain of submission, and you start to wonder if escape is even possible. But even these horrors pale compared to what happens when the law itself is twisted into a weapon, when the rituals and rules meant to protect are turned against you, locking you into a cycle of punishment with no end. The next time the bishop visits, you are summoned for a private inspection. The Mother Superior's eyes never meet yours as she hands you over to his attendants. You understand at last that every door here opens inward, deeper into the labyrinth, and that what waits in the center is not redemption, but annihilation. There is no rescue coming from the outside. There is only the system, grinding on year after year, crushing those who cannot be remade. You wonder who you will become, how much of yourself you will have to give up just to endure. And you know now, in this place the greatest danger is not what happens in secret. It's what happens with everyone's consent. The next phase begins quietly, with the summons at dawn. You are led, without explanation, through the freezing corridors to the Mother Superior's office, a room you've come to fear more than any locked cell. Her face is unreadable, lips pressed thin, hands folded over a leather-bound ledger. "There have been complaints," she says, her voice cool as river water. "We expect better from our novices." You sense in her posture the weight of hierarchy. She is not just an enforcer. She is a sentinel of a system built to crush any hint of disobedience. The conversation is brief. Repent, and you may be forgiven. Resist, and the consequences will follow. The message is as old as the stones themselves. Survival depends on submission. In the days that follow, you become an object lesson. You are assigned to menial tasks, shunned at meals, watched for any sign of defiance. The other girls avoid your eyes, terrified of guilt by association. Your penance is public, designed to isolate and humiliate. Kneeling for hours on cold stone, you are told to pray for forgiveness, reciting the same phrases until your voice breaks. Sleep is rationed, bread and water your only sustenance. Every act of discipline is justified as healing, but the real purpose is control. It's not just the nuns who wield power. The law itself sharpens their authority. By decree of both church and state, disobedience in a convent is considered a crime against God. Papal bulls from the late 14th century grant Mother Superiors the right to order seclusion, medical inspection, or corporal punishment without outside review. You learn this firsthand. After days of isolation, you are brought to the infirmary and examined by the convent's priest and his assistant. They speak in Latin, their words a cold ritual, as they search for any sign of moral corruption. The experience leaves you raw, exposed, and deeply ashamed, but you sense that your humiliation is routine, repeated for others who step out of line. Historical records from the time are unflinching. In 1455, Sister Marguerite of Rouen tried to tell her story of secret punishments, treatment for imagined ailments, and the silence enforced by her superiors. She was dismissed as unstable, subjected to months of isolation, and ultimately erased from the convent's memory. Her only legacy survives in a single deposition, buried in Inquisition archives, where she describes rooms without windows, meals slipped under the door, and prayers recited until meaning faded into delirium. Her fate is a warning. To speak is to vanish. The psychological assault is relentless. You watch other girls unravel, their spirits chipped away by endless penance and threat. Some withdraw into themselves, eyes vacant, voices barely more than whispers. Others break more violently, sobbing in the night, trembling at the approach of a senior nun. The convent hierarchy knows how to wield fear. Every rumor of a girl locked away, of secret punishments, of mysterious illnesses, serves to reinforce obedience. You witness day after day the transformation of hope into resignation. The oldest nuns, once rebels themselves, are now the harshest enforcers, repeating the cycle they once tried to resist. But here's what no one outside these walls can grasp. The worst punishments are not always physical. They are psychological. The destruction of trust, the isolation of suspicion, the threat of spiritual damnation for even imagined transgressions. The fear of hell is a tool, sharpened and used without mercy. You confess not because you are guilty, but because you are desperate to escape notice, to avoid the attention that brings punishment. You learn to police your own thoughts, your words, your dreams, until you are no longer sure what is true and what is simply survival. Yet even these terrors are not the darkest the convent has to offer. Rumors begin to swirl, whispered in the moments when the nuns turn their backs. A novice, barely more than a child, is discovered to be pregnant. The scandal is contained with terrifying speed. She is sent away for treatment, never to be seen again. Later, a small unmarked grave appears at the edge of the convent garden. The explanation is simple. God has taken another soul. But among the girls, the truth circulates. Sometimes escape from the convent's control is more dangerous than captivity itself. You begin to notice the signs, the glances, the quick silences, the fear whenever a senior nun approaches. You wonder how many secrets are buried here, how many stories have been erased with a prayer and a shovel. The Mother Superior reminds you daily. The convent is your family. No one outside will understand you now. The message is clear. Whatever happens here is fate. Unchangeable, unquestionable, holy by virtue of being hidden. But the truth is far worse. The law that was meant to protect you is now a cage, and every prayer you utter is a plea not for salvation, but for simple survival. You realize you have become both prisoner and warden, keeping yourself in line to avoid the punishments you once thought impossible. And as the bells ring out for evening prayers, you catch your reflection in a darkened window, pale, silent, and almost unrecognizable. You wonder, with a shudder, how much of yourself is left to lose before you, too, become just another silent shadow, another secret buried in the convent's unmarked earth. The darkness inside the convent deepens, settling over everything like a heavy veil. What once felt like cruel discipline now reveals itself as something far more monstrous, an entire system built to protect its own secrets, no matter the human cost. You begin to notice the patterns, the invisible mechanisms that keep terror humming quietly beneath the surface of daily ritual. Every prayer, every rule, every locked door works together to hide the real crimes, ones that can never be spoken aloud. It's the middle of winter when you learn the full extent of what happens to those who can no longer endure. The younger novices start whispering about Sister Agnes, a bright girl with an easy laugh who suddenly vanished from the refectory. At first, the nuns claim she has been sent to another house for spiritual recovery. But late at night, as you scrub floors in the freezing corridor, you hear Sister Madeline mutter, "Don't ask. She's beneath the chapel now." The words sink into your bones, colder than the stone beneath your knees. That night, you cannot sleep. When the others drift off, you rise and slip through the dark, drawn by something between fear and hope. The chapel looms above you, silent and empty. But below, beneath the altar, a faint, sour stench creeps from the floorboards. You find, hidden by a curtain, a trap door leading down into the crypt. You do not open it, but you see the iron lock, and you know, with a sick certainty, that it is not meant for the dead. The next morning, the atmosphere is changed. The Mother Superior's voice is sharper, her eyes more watchful. During prayers, a group of visiting priests arrives unexpectedly. Their presence brings a tension you can feel in the air, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The priests are given private access to certain girls, always chosen by the senior nuns. Those summoned return pale and silent, their faces drawn. No one speaks of what happens in the priest's quarters, but you see the bruises, the sudden limp, the way some girls will not meet your eyes. A rumor spreads. Those who resist are threatened with damnation, or worse, accused of spiritual impurity and sent to the punishment cells. But here's where the true horror emerges, not just in isolated acts, but in the way the whole convent normalizes and covers for them. You discover that the community outside the walls, parishioners, townsfolk, even your own family, revere the convent as a place of virtue. Gifts and alms pour in. Praise flows from the pulpit, and parents urge their daughters to seek God's peace in the cloister. No one questions the disappearances. No one asks why some novices return changed, or never return at all. Sometimes the consequences are impossible to hide. In the spring you hear muffled sobs behind the infirmary door. A novice, barely 14, writhing in pain, her belly swollen. The nuns insist she is sick, possessed, or being punished for imagined sins. But the truth whispers among the girls, a secret pregnancy, a child who will never see daylight. The fear of discovery is so great that desperate measures are taken. Historical records from the convent of Santa Agata in Florence describe the discovery of a mass grave of infants beneath the chapel in 1483, the result of decades of concealed scandal. You shudder, wondering how many unmarked graves lie beneath your own feet. The senior nuns move quickly, covering their tracks. The novice is sent away, for her own good, and the rest of you are warned that disobedience brings shame upon God. The lesson is clear. See nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. To survive, you must play your part. Act pious, keep your head down, become invisible. Every day you feel yourself fading, your laughter and hopes worn away by fear and complicity. You watch as the others do the same. But what chills you most is how everyone learns to accept the horror. The routines go on. Bells ring, prayers are said, candles lit, and secrets buried. The priests preach virtue from the pulpit while committing acts no law will ever punish. The nuns who once tried to protect now enforce silence, warning you that God sees everything, even as they hide what should never have been done. One evening, as dusk falls, you find yourself standing at the edge of the convent garden, staring at a patch of freshly turned earth. A senior nun stands beside you, her hands folded, her face unreadable. "Some burdens must be carried for the good of all," she murmurs. You sense she is both warning and confessing. She, too, was once a victim, now a warden, upholding the system that destroyed her innocence long ago. You realize the true horror is not only what is done here, but how it is accepted. The world outside calls this place holy. Inside, survival means learning to live with what you cannot escape or change. In the end, you are left with a choice as old as the convent itself. Obey and disappear inside yourself, or resist and risk vanishing altogether. The only hope for those who endure is to remember, even in secret, that what has been done to you is not your fault. But the walls do not care. The prayers do not save. The silence is complete. And as you kneel for evening prayers, your lips moving in unison with 100 others, you understand that the greatest crime of all is how easily horror becomes ordinary, how suffering becomes just another line in the ledger, another secret sealed beneath the stone. You are summoned for the last time. The air in the convent is stifling, thick with the scent of incense and old wax. You are led into a chamber where the Mother Superior sits with folded hands. On either side, the visiting priest and 2 town elders wait, their faces grave. "You stand accused of moral corruption," the priest intones, voice echoing from the stones, "of bringing shame upon this holy house." You look around and see the faces of the women who once whispered warnings, now silent, eyes downcast, each desperate to avoid your fate. You realize you are utterly alone. You plead for the truth to be heard. You speak of the punishments, the locked doors, the vanished novices. The elders shift uneasily, but the Mother Superior's expression never changes. "Confession is for the soul," she says. "You must repent or be cast out." The priest steps forward, his hand heavy on your shoulder. There is no appeal. Your testimony will be erased, your words twisted into evidence of your own guilt. You understand now. The system was never built for your salvation. It exists to protect itself. This is the horror at its peak. Not the punishments, not the silence, but the certainty that nothing you say will change what is already decided. In this moment, you glimpse your future. You will be cast out of the only home you have left, marked as a danger, denied family, denied faith, denied a voice. History remembers the trial of Abbess Jeanne des Anges at Loudun in 1632, a woman who tried to expose the darkness at the heart of her convent. Instead, she became the scapegoat. Her suffering used to reinforce the very system she had tried to dismantle. The lesson is carved into every wall. Those who resist are destroyed so that the institution may survive. As the verdict is read, you feel the last pieces of your old self slip away. There is no drama, only the cold efficiency of ritual. You are escorted to the gates, a single bundle of clothes in your arms, the faces of the sisters vanishing behind iron bars. The sky is gray and endless. You walk out alone, every step a severance from the only world you've ever known. For days, you wander the edges of the town, shunned by those who once called you daughter, cousin, friend. The shame clings to you, a mark more permanent than any wound. Others have walked this road before you. Women cast out for speaking, for breaking, for refusing to play the part assigned to them. Some vanish into poverty, others disappear entirely. You join the ranks of the lost, your story almost erased before it's even begun. But here's what the world cannot see. You are not broken. The secrets you carry become a kind of resistance, a thread connecting you to those who suffered in silence. You find others, former novices and outcasts, who share the same haunted look, the same hunger for truth. Together, you remember what the convent tried to erase. In secret rooms and hidden alleys, you whisper the names of the vanished, telling the stories the church would rather keep buried. In the darkness, a fragile network of survivors takes root. The system endures, its rituals unchanged, its authority unquestioned. Centuries later, archives reveal the scale of what was hidden: mass graves beneath convent chapels, suppressed testimonies, scandals erased from official records. Historians find fragments, brief accounts in church ledgers, depositions in the archives of Avignon and Florence, whispered rumors in village folklore. Each piece is a witness. Each voice, once silenced, demands to be heard. You remember it all. The cold, the prayers, the silence. The moment you realized you were not alone in your suffering. The day you chose to survive by holding on to the truth, no matter how carefully it had to be hidden. The convent wanted obedience. It bred complicity and erased dissent. But even here, there were those who refused to be entirely erased. Their legacy is not just one of trauma, but of survival. Now, you leave this story changed, knowing what the church wanted buried, seeing the patterns that repeated for centuries. The weapons of silence and shame did not end with the Middle Ages. You recognize their echoes in the modern world. Institutions that protect themselves, survivors blamed and cast out, the persistent struggle to make the invisible visible. If this journey has changed how you see the past and the power systems that shape our lives, hit subscribe now. This is how we unearth truths that were meant to stay in the dark. Because every survivor's testimony brings us closer to understanding not just what was done, but how it was allowed to happen. The past is never as distant as it seems, and the story does not end when the gates close behind you.